Hi everyone, and welcome to another video from eContriver. If you like what you see and you want to support us, then please remember to subscribe. Alright, let's get to it. Today we're going to look at a JavaScript game that'll use WASD to move a little dot around the screen. One of the first things that we're going to do today is we're going to have to open up a browser and go to GitHub. You're going to want to create your repo on GitHub. Then after you do that, these are some of the settings that you're going to want to set up. It's pretty basic. We're going to make this one public. When you do that, you just use the default settings. You get a README, and we'll go ahead and use that. We're going to copy the clone snippet here so that we can use that when we move over to the shell so that we can download this, and then after we make our changes, we will upload all of the changes that we make back to this server. So to clone that repo, we'll just use the command git clone, and then this will pull down the repo from GitHub, and from here we need a cd into that directory. Once we've gone into that directory, we should see all the files that were downloaded, which looks just like what was up on the server. Running git status here tells us if any changes made locally that haven't been submitted yet to the server. So I'm using VS Code here. I'm going to go ahead and open that entire project directory, and now I can see both of those files here. Here it's showing me that README file, and then we'll go ahead and change this header so that it's explaining that it's JavaScript, and create a new file, and this new file is the index.html file. This file is what your browser is going to load, so this is what the users will see. This is where the video game will be. But just to get us started, let's go ahead and just put some very basic things in here. Every HTML file needs a header and a title, so we're going to go ahead and put the title in there. We'll give that the name eContriver, and then we'll go ahead and put in there the JavaScript WASD game. We'll take this path, I went ahead and copied that path, and I paste that into my browser here. I'm using Chrome. When I paste that in there, I should be able to see the title. You see it up there on the tab, and that is the name that we put into that header. If you right click on the page and you select Inspect Element, you can go look at the code from any web page, and here we're going to see the code that we just typed. So far we've created an index.html, we've added some custom code, a header in the title section, and then we just loaded that up in the browser. Let's go ahead and add a little bit more here. We're going to add what's called the body. And then from here we'll give it a header. So this is something that will actually show on the page. As you noticed when we loaded the last page, it didn't have anything on the actual page. Now we'll start to build that content. So H1 just means header 1, it's the biggest header, and H2 is header 2, it's a slightly smaller header. And these can all be controlled and formatted independently. But for right now, we're just focused on getting to where we can do the game. So we're going to stay away from a lot of the HTML details. So let's go ahead and refresh with these changes, and now you can see the header 1 is eContriver, and then header 2 has a JavaScript WASD game. And as I hover over these inside of Chrome under this elements area, you can see that it's showing me what is under my mouse, and that's very useful. If something's not positioned just right, you can go ahead and hover over it, and then you'll see why it's there or what else is in that position that's causing the problem. I'm going to create a small little dot here, just something that we can move around the screen. Very simple. We're just going to draw a circle inside of Paint. We'll use that to move around the screen a little bit. This picture will be a PNG file. PNGs support transparency, but when we're creating them from Paint, I don't think that you can do that from here. And this video isn't really about creating graphics, so we're just going to be okay with using a small dot with a white background for right now. But just keep in mind that that does have a white background. Now to load this up, you use the image tag, and then we give it a source, and that source we're going to call it a .png. This is where we save that dot that we just created. And notice it's right next to the index.html, so we don't have to give it any directories, we can just reference the file. And because we just loaded that dot, now we can refresh the page, and when we do, we see that image tag with the source attribute. And here I'm hovering over it. You can see it on the actual page. It's highlighted. It also tells you on the right side there the dimensions of it, which is useful too later if you are seeing something that's not matching the sizes you wanted. Perhaps you can check that they are actually being displayed as you intended. Now we're going to start adding JavaScript. So everything in HTML is static, and everything that's static on an HTML page means that it's not moving, it's not changing. When you see stuff changing or updating or moving on a web page, on an HTML page, that's all generally done with JavaScript. There's some other ways to do this, but the general methodology is JavaScript. So we're going to load up some JavaScript here, and we're just going to use an alert. This just tells us, hey, JavaScript's loading, JavaScript's working as we expect. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and add the canvas tag, and this enables you to draw graphics on a web page. We will interact with this using JavaScript, and that'll enable us to build the game itself. We can draw layers, we can add images, we can make things move. We're going to give this a width of 1040 and a height attribute of 640, so it'll be 1040 pixels wide and 640 pixels tall. Now when we go ahead and load this page, we're going to see something that's a little bit funny here, and that is that the canvas actually is going to show up before the image, which is not really expected, right? If you look at how we coded this, there's an image tag above the canvas tag. But what's actually going on here is that the canvas is in line with the image. So the image is on the left and the canvas is on the right, and the canvas is so tall that it makes it look like the image is below the canvas, but it's actually just to the left and at the very bottom left corner, and the canvas is to the right and much taller. Now, because this is inlining, we can just create a div, which will create a new kind of block section in the HTML page, and then the canvas will look like it's underneath the dot image. So that's what we're going to do here, just something real simple to put this canvas into a div. And generally you break your HTML pages into these kind of div blocks. Very easy way to group things, organize things, and then we can move everything that's inside of this div block around and change its properties. We're going to give it the ID canvas because this is the div tag that'll own or contain our canvas. Now you can see that the image properly loads above the div tag. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and reach in to the HTML page and grab one of the tags. And so to do this, you use the document get element by ID. You can get them by name, or there's a whole bunch of different ways, and you can query attributes to get things, but right now we're just going to get it by the ID. You should be guaranteed that the ID will be unique, and in this way we're going to get the tag with the game ID. And this can be any element. This does not require that it be a certain element type, but we're going to get a hold of that in JavaScript, and once we have that, then we can do things with it. Like here we're going to change the background color. We just want to make sure that we've got it working, that we're correctly selecting the thing. So let's go ahead and try that. We're going to say document get element by ID. We're going to grab that game tag, which is the canvas that has that ID, and when we load this, something funny is going on. It's not actually changing the background. So we immediately have a problem here. There's some bug in our code. We need to go look at it. Now inside of Chrome, if you click on that, you see on the right over there it had that red X. I clicked on that and it's telling me what the error is. There's some error when our JavaScript loads, and it's saying here that this object is null. And the reason why that object is null is because JavaScript runs as soon as the page loads, immediately. And what we need to do is run it after the page has been constructed. If the object itself that we're trying to change has not yet been loaded, then we're going to have a problem. And you'll notice in our HTML page, our JavaScript is loaded as one of the very first things that happens, and it is executed immediately. So what we need to do is tell it wait until the entire page is loaded. And you can do that by using document.addEventListener, and then the event that we want to listen for is when the content has been loaded. This will be called after the entire HTML page has been loaded, and then all the elements in the page will be available to us. Now there's ways that you can put JavaScript into the HTML. You can actually put it, instead of putting it into this file and into the head section, you can put the JavaScript into the HTML page, and if you put it after the element, it would have worked. But here we're just going to wait until the entire page is loaded, because this is where we're going to put most of our game code anyways. So now we've got that red loading correctly, and we've seen that work. Now we can start to expand on this a little bit. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to add another event listener, And we're going to add this event listener whenever the user presses a key. And we'll put that inside of this other block because we only want these to work after the page has been loaded. Pretty much most of the game is going to be inside of this kind of block after the game has been loaded. You can optimize things a little bit and load things early, but we'll get into preloading later. For right now, let's go ahead and we'll add this event listener, and so this is going to happen when the key goes down. As soon as the user presses a key and it touches down on the keyboard, this event will fire. And then we will call this move function, and this move function we're going to put a switch statement here which will just check to see if the event key, this is something that's predefined by JavaScript, was equal to arrow up, make the background blue, and then we'll know if it's actually registered our key press. We'll also change it so that when we hit the arrow down key, we'll change it to another color, green, and in this way we'll be able to verify that both the up and down are working. Now once we leave this state of red color, we're not going to see it go back to that state until we reload the page. But we will be able to continue to press the up and down arrows and see the colors change from blue, green. If you hit the up arrow twice, it would change to blue twice. You wouldn't see any change, of course, on the page, but the actual function would still fire. So let's go ahead and just reload the page and make sure that this is all working as expected. So now I'll go ahead and hit the arrow keys, and there we go, up, down, down. So these are working as we expect, so this is good. Now we've got some JavaScript that's manipulating the canvas element on the HTML page, and now we can start to play around a little bit more with this. Before we get too far into that though, let's go ahead and commit some of this code that we've worked on. So now we want to commit the code. The first thing you want to do is you want to add it. So to add that with git, we're going to do a git add dot, and that'll add everything from here down. Dot means the current directory. Git status will tell us what all we've added. If you ran git status before we added the files, then they'd show as red, but now that we've added them, they show as green. And then we just want to put a message in there, say, you know, we're adding a web page with a canvas that will change color with the arrow keys up and down. And after you commit that, you can run git status again, and then you'll see that there's nothing left to do. But it does tell us that we're ahead of the origin main by one commit. The origin is where we cloned this repo from. If you remember in the beginning, it was from GitHub at the eContriver organization. And then main is the current branch we're on. From here we're going to go ahead and push to origin. Now origin, when you clone the repo, origin is where it came from. So that is the origination of this repo on your local machine, which is our GitHub repo. And then main is the branch. Now this is a new thing. The branch used to be called master. For now we're going to push to the main branch, which is what GitHub is currently using. And after we push, you can see here on the server, which is github.com, all of our files show up. So we've now pushed our local commit up to the GitHub servers. The thing is that later we'll change this main branch to master, just because that's what I'm familiar with and what the old normal was. And I'll show you that in another video. I'll link to that in the section below. So here what we're doing is we're going to use GitHub Pages to actually display our game. So by just changing this section right here, GitHub Pages, and selecting that we want the branch main, and then we'll use the root, which means it'll load the index.html file from the root of our repo. Now as soon as you do this, the page isn't available, so reloading the page is showing you that it's just not available. And if you go read on their pages, they'll talk about some of this stuff and how to set it up and all the different configurations that you can do. But for now, what we're really doing here is this project is a training, so showing the content of that website on the actual web page that they give us, the GitHub Pages site, works well, because now we can show the game content and everything as it is uploaded. And the cool thing about this is, as we continue to make changes to our code, it will automatically update this page. Now you won't be able to go back in history. It's not like you can view this page at a specific time in history, but you will be able to view the current state of the game. All right, let's go ahead and add a couple more colors. When we hit the left and right arrows, we'll do blue, green, yellow, and purple. Let's go ahead and test that out. Up, down, left, right. That looks good. Now what you might notice here is, as we were hitting up and down, it's also moving the page up and down, scrolling the page. And so we'll add this call to the event to prevent the default. And what that does is it stops the default behavior of the browser. It swallows the event and it prevents it from propagating up to the part of the browser that would handle that is actually moving the page up and down. This way, when the user's moving the character with the arrow keys, it's not going to be scrolling the page around. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and grab the context from the canvas. The context is how we draw images and manipulate the canvas. Here we're going to tell we want the 2D context. They also support 3D context, but for our game we're just going to do a top-down. We'll just use the 2D context. Now we'll go ahead and draw the dot image. When you specify you want to draw an image, you have to give it both the X and Y coordinate where you want it to draw. Now the top left corner of the canvas is considered the 0, 0 point. As you increase X, you go to the right, and as you increase Y, you actually go down on the canvas. The image itself will be drawn with the top left corner at 0, 0. So the image will be in the top left corner of the canvas. Now we have to define this variable dot image, so we'll just create a new image object, and then we'll specify that its source attribute is pointing to the dot.png. This is the same file that we put on the HTML page, but now we're going to put it inside the canvas. Now we have to put this inside of an onload function. If we don't put it inside of an onload function, we'll have the same problem we had where we had to put the JavaScript and the DOM content loaded. Essentially the canvas would try to draw the image before it was potentially loaded. So this code will make it wait until the image has actually been loaded, downloaded to the client's machine, and then when it's available, we'll draw it. So now we're going to go ahead and move the image around on the screen. In order to do that, we have to use some variables. We're going to use .x and .y, and we'll have to put those into where we're actually going to draw the image. Because we're going to actually be moving the image when we're hitting the arrow keys, we're going to move this from the top level where it just drew it as soon as the page loaded down into the event handler that's handling the arrow key presses for now. This is not where we'll keep this code, but this is just to see if things are working. The syntax here is you can either use a minus equals, which is the same as doing a .y minus 10. So this means that every time we hit the down arrow, it will move our dot 10 pixels. There's going to be some bugs here. What you're going to notice is that this isn't working. And why isn't this working? This is because the dot image variable is not known. Just as well, the visible canvas, the context are not actually known to the function scope that we're in right now. So what we have to do is we have to define those. Let's go ahead and debug this to get us started and see what the problem is. Like, if we didn't know what was going on, we'd want to come in here and run the code, and we can click on console and it shows us any of the errors, or you could click on the errors like we did in the previous example and it'll take you to these, and you can see here that it's telling us that these variables are not defined. So now we know we have to move these variable definitions up. So we'll go ahead and move the visible canvas variable. We can't really set it yet because we don't have the game ID. Just go ahead and set it to null here. Now this is where we're defining variables, so we don't want to be defining them, redefining them inside of that function. And here we're going to go ahead and do the same with the context, and we need to do the same with the dot image. Alright, so now we have our 5 global variables, which we will get rid of. That's bad practice. But now when we reload the page, if we hit our arrow key, look at that, it moved up 10 pixels. And our dot is 20 pixels, so you can see it just kind of moved it up half. Now there's some artifacting, right? It left the old image, so that means that every time you draw an image, it just stays in the canvas. And now we've added it to go down, so you can move down, which is what we wanted, right? Before we were subtracting 10, but as I mentioned earlier, it's actually when you add 10 here that you go down. It's because the coordinate system for the canvas is where top left corner is 0, 0. Now I'm going to go ahead and prove to you that the plus equal syntax is the same as just doing the dot y plus 10. Behaves exactly as the previous code. So this is just a shorthand way of saying dot y equals dot y plus 10. And here we're going to subtract our 10. So now we should be able to go back up. So let's see how that works. down, 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 up, up, up. That looks good. Now one thing we want to do is we want to get rid of that artifacting where all those previous images were left. So we will go ahead and clear the rectangle. This is going to clear all the images that were drawn. Now let's go ahead and add our left and right. There we go, and now we're just moving the dot. Let's go ahead and check in some of the code changes that we've made. So we'll run a git status here just to see what all we've modified. And then I'll run a git diff. This shows me everything that I've changed. Everything looks good here. One thing we might do is add a comment to that prevent default, just to remind ourselves later that that was there so that the page didn't scroll. Now we'll add the files, and then we'll go ahead and commit them, and we'll push them up to the server. Now I can see these changes on the GitHub website. And we'll add a little bit to the README here with a link that takes you to the live game. Now again, this is always going to be the latest version, not the current version that we're working on. So if you visit this link at a later date, it will have a newer version. We'll go ahead and update all the copyrights. And we put copyrights in here, even though we're using the MIT license. The MIT license pretty much lets anybody do whatever they want with the software. It's one of the most relaxed licenses, but it forces them to retain the copyright. So we will always have our copyright left in this software if anybody chooses to use it. Now one thing that would be nice is if we could tag this code so that we could always find the changes that we've made. By doing a git log here, I can find the actual commit ID, it's a hash, that I want to use, that I want to actually tag. So that'll mark this commit as v1. You'll notice that I'm in the GNU Nano text editor, which I really don't care for. But as soon as you type that command, it wants you to add a message about what you did. Because that opened the Nano text editor, we can look at changing that later. We also need to add this doc type. This just tells all the browsers what kind of file is this. When they receive it, even though it has a .html, inside of it they could have HTML4, HTML5. For HTML5, the tag is just HTML. Now here again, I'm going to make a tag for v2, and we're going to tag this other commit. And I'm going to go ahead and change my editor here to vi. And now I have to open a new shell, which will source that bash rc file I just modified. And after this, I can go ahead and add my comment using vi. Notice that was vi, not nano. And now here's my commit history, and you can see it has the tags. Both v1 and v2 are in here. Now we'll go ahead and push, but this time you have to add -- tags so that the tags show up. You'll see that those are now up on the server. By clicking on these tags, you can view the commits that they point to. Alright, so let's go ahead and review. We created an index.html page, created game.js that had a lot of our JavaScript code, created a license.txt, we created a README, made a game where we can move a dot around using the arrow keys, not quite WASD yet, you'll have to tune in for the next episode to see that, and we've pushed all of this code up to a GitHub server. Thanks for watching, and please remember to subscribe if you want to support us.